the next slide I'm going to build up as a bit of a montage. And what I'm wanting to emphasize with this is that I know predominantly a lot of us are in the business space and maybe in a technology or software space. But again, if we think about the mission, at least for the Agilist, is being able to help individuals and organizations, all organizations adapt to an increasingly dynamic and complex world. I think it's more than just software and digital, and it's more than just business, in fact, as well. So with that, I'll just build up the next slide. So what we have here is we've got businesses that need to compete and remain relevant. They need to be able to continue delivering value to stakeholders, their customers, or the beneficiaries. We've got unanticipated black swan events that we may not have predicted 6 months ago. That's something that we've got to deal with. That's increasing uncertainty. We've got education in this vastly complex world. There seems to be an arms race in education. A quick story on that. My dad, who retired about 10 years ago, spent his career as a successful accountant and auditor. He went into his first job in around 20 without any qualifications whatsoever. But he built up his qualifications in conjunction with the experiences and opportunities that was presented to him. Now it seems to even get the most basic accountancy job, you need to have a degree, a master's, and be deeply in debt and have 10 less years to save up for your pension or for your mortgage or whatever it might be. So there seems to be a movement in education as well. And how do we educate ourselves, and how do we educate the next generation in this kind of complex dynamic? Something else which is similar is the career, the tenure that we have in each place that we get employed, or our contracts that we may have with a contract seem to be getting shorter and shorter. There's a dynamic there, so that's something else where we need to support individuals and organizations. Work-life balance. So particularly with the situation we're in here, where most of us are in lockdown, we have to work from home. So how do we juggle the work-life balance? There's lots of freedoms, lots of constraints which have been open, but there's some other challenges which we've had to deal with. Financial security. So the pound, dollar, yen, euro in our pocket seems to be getting weaker and weaker due to lots of different circumstances, globalization, automation, all kinds of macro factors that's affecting us on a very, very personal level. What about our financial ambitions for ourselves or for our family? There's issues around our place in society, or how we recognize and interact with society. There seems to be a movement happening here, and the pace of change seems to be getting faster and faster. We seem to be gleaning or getting a lot of our information about society through social media, for example. And also social media is presenting some opportunities, but also some threats and some dangers around kind of status anxiety, for example. And then finally, families and parenthood as well, is that there are many opportunities, but also many fears and anxieties around raising the younger generations in this world that's becoming more and more complex. How do we help them navigate in this complex world? So those are some of the areas that I wanted to cover, just to extend it beyond extend our horizons beyond where we may be operating from an individual team or organizational point of view. And what I'd like to do, I first thought of doing this as a breakout, but the discussions are so rich with everyone in the same room. We'll keep this in the same room. So what I'd like to do is just discuss sense respond versus predictive control in these suggested areas. So I've spoken about business, I've spoken about the black swan events such as COVID, change in education, career, work-life balance, and so on and so forth. And what would be quite nice is just to pause there and think to ourselves about a particular focus on the left-hand side here, which we identify with, and feel free to choose something else beyond this group of 8 suggestions I've made, and think about the consequences from remaining in a predict and control mindset versus a sense and respond mindset. So again, just think about these 8 areas or some other area, and how would you recommend, or how would you suggest we navigate the increasing complexities and uncertainties based on these 8 or something else that may come to mind? So when something comes to mind, feel free to unmute yourself and share your thinking with the room.
Coming back to the politics, it's a shame Brianna's just left. While she was talking, I thought about Jacinda Ardern and the very much sense and respond attitude they had to the COVID-19 crisis. And to some extent, Germany did that as well. And the countries that seem to have dealt with this best were the ones that were responding as quickly as possible to the situation, as opposed to the countries that were saying, that were trying to, it's as if some countries, ourselves included, were trying to tell coronavirus what to do. and well, certainly America and Brazil took that approach. The US and Brazil, I should say. So there are some good examples of, in the most unpredictable situation where, you know, everybody wants to be in control and everybody wants to know in advance what's going to happen. Actually, the sense and respond approach, I think, is the one that has won out. And
I think Giovanni, I agree with you. And I think it's something that happens in almost every one of those. I mean, I think in every one of those elements, I think if we change the predict word with having a vision, a strong vision, you know, a direction, an overall direction that we want to end up in, and then we sense and respond as we find our way there, we will have a better outcome. We as humans, you know, hate being out of control and hate a sense of not being in control. It's a big emotional trigger for us. But it's something that maybe, I think, as Mia brought out, if we can learn to help people with that through an agile mindset, and maybe that's the place that we could start with, we can help people understand that actually having ambiguity is a good thing, as long as you have a clear vision of where you want to go. If you're sailing a boat, you know that you're going to have to keep tacking to get to where you want to get to, because you need to work with the winds and the currents. You can't work against them. Although you want to go from here to A to B, you're going to get there by going in a very circuitous route, but you will eventually get there if you relax and respond to change. Maybe.
I think, yeah, I just wanted to add something. Oh, Giovanni was pointed out and was this idea of sense and respond in comparison to the other types of responses, particularly the British. I'm wondering whether that relates to the politicisation of the disease, in the sense that if we place control on people, how are they going to react, rather than actually trying to observe the disease and make, observation in the sense of the most logical thing would be test, test, test. The countries that did well in the initial outset were the ones that went and tested as the first step. Would you agree? So testing was a form of observation. That's how I see it. Yeah, you agree, yeah. I got the thumbs up from Giovanni.
In this scenario, the first step of the sense and respond is test, 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 and then respond with, I didn't mention South Korea because theirs was a very controlling approach to coronavirus, but they were responding to the tests. And they were telling people to isolate. So, and they didn't, to the point where, as far as I'm aware, they didn't need a lockdown. But yeah, it goes against the human psyche. But the sailing a boat analogy. I've written that down because I think that's a great idea, because you're attacking with the wind or against the wind, but you still have an outcome. You still have a destination, and that's such a good analogy. I've written it down. I forgot who said that a second ago.
Alistair, I think.
Yeah. Well, working with the present. Really, you can't do anything else when you're on a boat.
And keeping
you've got to work with the present.
Your outcomes. And I don't know if anyone else has worked with OKRs, objectives and key results. I have a little bit, and I actually think there's some value in those. In having OKRs, especially when they're team driven rather than force fed downwards. And then that's the problem. If they're force fed downwards, you go back into a prediction control scenario. I should shut up for a minute.
No, it's fine. Sven has had his hand up and he's unmuting himself as well, so I know he's keen to say something. And then maybe pass on to Philippe, because I've just seen him unmute himself.
Yeah, sure. I just like to add to the sailboat scenario, because I really like that a lot myself. Right? I think it is really awesome. I used it a ton in the past, and I think the question is whether we determine where we need to go with the sailing boat, whether we need to reach point B, or what the objective is. If the objective is to cross the Atlantic Ocean, then the other coast of the Atlantic Ocean is the aim. Or whether it's a specific harbor, or whether if we are on vacation, maybe it's a good time to say, okay, it doesn't necessarily mean that we need to sail there, but we need to have a good time for the next 2 weeks, because otherwise it'll be time really not well spent. So I think the sailboat scenario also works in terms of, and that where Giovanni comes in, determining what the OKRs are, right? What is the actual result that we want to gain from sailing? Is it to reach that particular harbor? And if so, why is that so important? And if it is, and if it is fine, right? Completely fine. Or is it the journey, right? Is it to have a good time? Or is it to kick the tires of the boat?
And I think no, absolutely right, Sven. And I think the important thing there is that and I think this is where we move into the area that is kind of I'm a bit passionate about, which is having the right, a strong and the right type of leadership within an agile framework, within an agile context. With a lot of people, we obviously talk about autonomy, mastery, purpose. We talk about self-organizing teams. We talk about all these things. And there is a question out there, which is, well, where does leadership fit into all this? And my argument is, or my premise is actually that leadership is even more important, but it's the right type of leadership that is important. Because if we have command and control leadership, that's where I see agile teams just falling over within about 8 months, give or take. But whereas if you have, emotionally intelligent, enabling servant leadership, allowing people to just, do their amazing stuff as us humans are designed to do, then you have some amazing results. And I think that, I'm enjoying listening to you guys talking, because I'm kind of going like, yeah, there are enough of us around who probably get this, that we can really make a difference and help people. And it's the leadership that takes on the fears of the group, right? A proper strong leader takes on the fears of the group and then manages those for them, so that you don't have to be in a constant control environment, but you can actually be in a, hey guys, it's all going to be okay. Let's go. Let's look at the results that we've done, and you keep pointing people back to successes, and you keep encouraging them about the future. And we haven't taken our eye off the ultimate goal, whatever that was, and so forth. Then maybe something around that. But,
even the term leadership implies control. I did an interesting experiment with some students and engineering students, and I did this thing where we compared teams qualitatively and quantitatively on rotating leadership and collaborative sort of a completely different model, and used the old-fashioned project champion aspect, so that the people that would put their hand up to lead. So it was very small groups, and interesting enough, it's not something that's in industry now, but it's something to fathom, fathom the unfathomable, that there is no such thing as a leader, that the leadership is a temporal thing.
Interesting.
I'm just putting that out there.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting possibility in development. Just want to go to a few other people as well. Maybe Philippe, Steve, then Brett. I know Brett's had his hand up for a while. Philippe, I saw you unmute yourself for a moment. Did you want to share something?
Yeah, I don't think there's any black and white in what we're talking about. You've got value chains, and some elements of value chain might be more at an element of novelty and uncertainty, and indeed Agile applies to that. But if you got to invent everything in the value chain, you're not going to go very far. And you have to be able to realize some elements that are certain, like your delivery process, for instance. If you roll the dice every time you deliver software, you're not going to go very far. And for things like this, and the nature of it is that you need to industrialize what you do over time, so you can rely on it. And talking about, in abstraction, about complexity, I think is the wrong sort of thing in a way. That some elements are in complexity and recognizing those, and I need to rely on elements that are not in complexity, and we equally need to realize those so we can give the adequate response, and we have the adequate foundation to give the adequate response. Otherwise, we never build a foundation. And also another point was, I was quite happy with how the UK government treated COVID, in the sense that they give a lot of responsibility to people to make judgments. I'm not sure what's the right thing to do. And I don't know why, if it's actually disprove complexity theories, or actually whether the people did not have the skills to be trusted with it. And if you look at France, which I look at obviously, the response was much more severe, much more controlling, worked better. If you look at Spain, it was extremely drastic. Maybe it worked better. So some elements, and then you could argue, was it because we were actually in crisis, we're not in complexity, and it needed leadership, and very, very tough leadership. If you look at China, it's very tough leadership. They went to lock buildings. And I think, I'm not sure whether leaving, when you leave the judgment to people, they need to have the skills to apply that judgment. And I'm not sure in COVID that was right. And I think, a predict and control, certainly a control mechanism, was actually needed and fairly drastic. And the countries that have done that seem to have done better.
Thank you, Philippe. Steve, I noticed you're unmuted. Did you want to share something?
Well, Ed, the conversation has moved on at such a rapid rate. I think I'm still back with the ship, because I wanted to add to the ship analogy, because I actually use the analogy a lot in my own work. Is that it is about the journey. It is also about your destination, but it's a requirement that whatever journey you're on, you avoid up and coming issues. Even the greatest sail ships have to sail around islands. They don't go through them. Old ships have to look carefully at rocks that they might founder against. So you have to have some element of prediction if you have maps, but also guidance from a captain to get you around issues. However, that said, leaving that alone, I quite like what's just being said about the reaction to COVID. I think that the problem is we tend to have a mindset about societies from times gone by. So what struck me as surprising, and I think it also shocked the government, the British government, is people's requirement for leadership and their reaction to suggestion. So when the government said, stay home, don't go out, protect the NHS, they did it so much that it was a shock to the government, because pretty much everyone stayed at home and no one did absolutely anything. What's come out to me is the amount of people that are still terrifically frightened to leave their homes because they believe some bogeyman or some virus is going to get them. And so they won't do anything to expose themselves to existence, even though we're talking about a greater reduction of infection, freedom to open up more shops and do more things. People are still fearful. I've got people coming to me all the time asking, what to do, how they should run their lives, because they're so frightened. The government, in their leadership, created fear with the hope that people would have some common sense, and common sense isn't overly common, unfortunately.
Thank you, Steve. We have 2 or 3 minutes left, so we're looking to close. Brett, do you have your hand raised? Do you want to share some thoughts?
Yeah, just briefly. For me, it's about language. I'm probably going back a few in the conversation stack now. I tend to think of objective and plan as kind of on a continuum rather than completely different things. And I think words like control, I think language is very important in getting people to accept things. So we talked about testing and those companies that are very reactive to testing. There are still elements of plan there. They were planning how to do the testing. They were planning what they would do based on a testing result. They had a plan in place for if one person was positive, they then would execute a plan. For me, it's about the scope of the plan. And I think maybe going back to what Philippe was saying about mixing that can be planned, that's known and that there isn't. So I think it's about I use the word brittleness more than control, in trying to not sort of completely say it's absolutely binary, it's got to be this or this.
Thank you, Brett. Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for the rich contributions. There's always a fear when you do something for the first time that I'm just going to be listening to, and not really have an interaction. So it has been a real kind of many-to-many discussion. So that's what I was driving for, and it's been absolutely fantastic. Just in closing, we weren't really able to get to the next areas where I wanted to dive into these particular areas. By the way, I think I'm hearing myself echo. So if you're not on mute, just pop yourself on mute for a moment. That would be good. So some areas that I wanted to dive into, perhaps on another call that I'll schedule in a few weeks' time, is looking around psychology, decision-making, strategy, ways of working, going back to the education and training, looking at transformation, so catalyze a profound change in individuals and organizations to find and deliver value. Talking about resilience, the ability for an individual or an organization or a country to be able to bounce back from a shock event. And then also career development as well. So the next time we have this call, we can dive into some of these, and perhaps there's some other areas that you guys want to talk about. So just in wrapping up, I'd like to say thank you. Thank you for being on this call. Thank you for also those who have subscribed and are making a small donation each month to receive the Agilist. The Agilist, again, its mission is to help individuals and organizations sense to respond to a rapidly changing world. If you want to subscribe to it or contribute to it, just hit that URL there. Also, the subscribers are invited to a Slack channel as well. So it's a forum where people could discuss these things, what's in their mind. It's a forum for mutual support as well. So once you subscribe to the Agilist, you're also invited to the Slack channel as well. It's just hit 1/2 the hour. So again, thank you so much, and look out for the next meetup. All the best, guys.
Fabulous. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dean.
Thank you. Looking forward to the next one. Nice to meet you all.
Much appreciated.
That was really interesting.
It was. Take care.
Well done, Dean. Great stuff.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Cheers. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.